Okay, so welcome, and this is our second information session. It was a series of information sessions on the use of learning and evaluation files. It's a kind of a fancy way of saying portfolio. There is not a great deal of difference between what we're talking about and what many of you have already used as portfolios in other subject areas. But today what we're doing is something a little bit different. We're looking at, I think all of us understand the benefits of portfolios, but what we're doing today is really looking at the benefits of combining portfolios with the integration of technology in Integrative Project Program Classrooms. Technology kind of goes very well with IP in the sense that IP was already configured as a kind of innovative program, in the sense that the content of the program is not precise in the same way as the content of a science secondary 5 program would be, or a math secondary 5 program would be. The competencies are much more process oriented as opposed to content oriented. And although that's wonderful in the sense that a teacher who's been teaching it for many years starts to appreciate the kind of creativity and freedom that he or she has to create a kind of program that really is based on developing autonomy and responsibility in students. At the beginning, I think first and second year IP teachers struggle with the idea that there isn't a specific content to this program other than that every child has to pick a project and complete it. And so people are often struggling for some kind of structure. So that every student who's doing a different project has something in common with every other student who's doing a project. Because in theory, the projects could be anything from a very global social justice-based project where kids are interacting with maybe experts from around the world to a very small project. And so one of the things that does structure a classroom is the use of learning and evaluation files, the use of portfolios. What makes that even richer, we think, and the use of the integration of technology in IP classrooms not only expands the ability, the parameters of what a child can learn, but it also continues that notion of building autonomy and responsibility for students. They generate and manage their own use of the technology that is integrated into the classroom. So today we're really going to focus on the integration of technology with always the lens of a learning and evaluation file in mind. So in other words, how does the use of a virtual classroom, blogs within the virtual classroom, and the use of digital LEFs, how does all of that expand and add to the benefits of the integrated project program? We're going to do an activity right away that's going to allow you to get a sense of what we talk about when we say a virtual classroom on the IP website. We'll take each of those aspects of the integration of technology you're already using and make it very teacher-friendly, very student-friendly, and also in some aspects, and that's entirely up to the teacher and his or her pedagogical needs and desires, also available to people like mentors, parents, other teachers at the school, the parent community, classmates with each other, etc. Because they have access to this at any time from any internet connection, and so do you, you could write a little note to them at night or on a weekend or in the morning before you see them to say that, you know, I noticed that everybody is having a problem with X, or I noticed that we're coming up to a term report card and I'm going to be looking for evidence of competency development, and so I'm going to be concentrating on Y. And so that all the students, and again, it gets back to that idea that because the students are so spread out in terms of the types of projects that they're doing, that we're always looking for elements that all the projects should have in common. And that's really where you see the competency development, is in those common objects, those common criteria. So to write a post to your students on a regular basis, and then they have access to read it, and it causes them to reflect on their own learning, and not only to reflect on it, but it focuses their reflection. You're always, I think the role of a teacher in IP is really to focus the learning. The students choose their own learning path, they choose their own learning goal, but the role of the teacher is to give them little triggers, little questions, periods of reflection, and elements to reflect on that allow them to focus their learning. And it's really a way for you to detail the kind of evidence of learning you're going to be looking for. Because that's one of the uses of an LEF, learning and evaluation file, is for the students to understand the difference between just a draft of a project plan, for example, and then a much more precise and adapted plan that shows what they're going to do and how they've adapted it and how they've changed what they're doing. And that really becomes evidence of competency development, as opposed to just maybe a calendar that has a bunch of dates and a bunch of words written on it. So it's really helping them as you direct them through these blog entries that you create for them. What I'd like to do now is show you firsthand a class in action. We have several IP training videos that have been shot in IP classrooms across the province. I treasure these videos because they take you right inside a classroom. There's nothing more powerful than watching the students in action in any classroom, but in this case, the IP classroom. So last year in Cowansville, we did a series of 3 videos, and all the videos, what they have in common is the integration of technology. Now, this class didn't use virtual classrooms on the IP website. They were using a bit of a more limited version of a blog on their school board portal. But we tried to capture moments of the students integrating technology. It's a powerful tool to use in your classroom with your kids as well, and they get to see other kids across the province doing the same program.
I just wanted to say it was great to see the video of another classroom. I'm in an isolated board, and I've never been able to meet with someone else who teaches integrated projects or seen inside a classroom. So it gives me a lot of good ideas when I'm able to see another teacher doing the same class.
It goes so well with this program. They seem to go hand in hand that even I can't even imagine anymore teaching about or being part of this program without thinking about the use of technology in the program. So Françoise wanted to make a comment.
What I do think is that, yes, they have this, I agree in the video, and it says like they want like the instant feedback. But also, I think that we have to be careful because but kids are basically, it's like their technology is embedded in their bodies, and sometimes it becomes very difficult for them to have a real interaction with a person. And as much as our students are able to keep logs and use technology to keep track of their project, like I have one who keeps track of his progress on an app that he found, and I'm very happy about that. But I do organize every day 6 on our schedule when we have IP, that they know it's the sharing circle where I bring them in and I read their log that they keep on file. But I says, on day 6, I want you to come together. And this is where we throw the questions up in the air. And if someone is not in queue and, oh, what did so-and-so did, it's like, okay, what have you done so far? And like, there's one of my students, she had a big drawback on her project. She just wanted to drop everything, that time of year. And the team, this is where I say, okay, now it's time to give feedback. What do you think? What can someone else bring to your project? Because otherwise they don't talk to each other. And we're fortunate because one of the kids' project is about having her own bakery one day. So every day 6 she brings either cakes or brownies or something because she's trying to find something that, would get her thing started, like something she could be famous for. So we have the round table where I force them to actually have this interaction, this instant feedback, but face to face. Crees are really good into their oral culture, and it's something that they have good memory, they're good storytellers, and it's important to also respect that, there is something behind the technology, that they are who they are because of, well, their culture. And I think that this is another thing, that as much as I like the technology, that I also value the fact that they have to be able to sit, look at each other, and talk. And I think that's another important thing to do.
I agree with you 100%. And what we always say about the virtual classroom and this whole idea of using blogs is that it's an extension of the real classroom. It doesn't mean it's a replacement. There's something very rich about sitting across and looking someone in the eyes and hearing their opinions and receiving feedback from them in a kind, supportive way. But one of the competencies we're trying to help students develop through this program is communication, and all sorts of communications. It's a very important competency, is the communication face-to-face. And one of the videos is about student exchanges, where the students talk a great deal about how difficult it is to learn to give feedback to their classmates that's maybe not very positive, that might even be quite critical, but to do it in such a way that it's about improving the person's project and not about making the student feel undervalued or that the project is terrible or that it's a criticism of them as a person, but it's a critique of their work and how they could improve it. And we did a lot of talking in that classroom as we were filming about that notion of commenting and giving feedback. So I agree with you 100%, Françoise. And I think, as I said, there's a whole teaching element around that, those kind of roundtable discussions and setting up reflective questions that every student has to talk about.
Can I just ask, I suppose on a different topic, I keep on coming back to how this could be evaluated and whether or not we what is the experience of other people when they are evaluating the type of feedback or the type of exchanges that students have?
Because it's interesting you asked that. One of the committees I sit on is you probably all know that the government has a structure. There's a dean table, which is all the directors of educational services for all the school boards in the province, and then dean has several subcommittees, and one of the subcommittees is the CARE committee, which is about evaluation. And I'm a member of that committee. And one of the things that we talked about is whether or not you could consider something like students writing on a blog or even commenting on the blog entries of somebody else as something that could be evaluated. And that was a specific question, exactly what you're asking, Carolyn. And as we talked about it, we began to think that one of the strengths of having a virtual classroom and an online blog is that you have permanent evidence. So let's say it's term 2 and you want to evaluate the student's plan, for example, and whether or not they've adjusted it and adapted it and reflected and whether they're really using it as planned, and et cetera, et cetera. And there have been several posts or several blog entries about planning and adapting a plan, and several feedback sessions where students were asked to comment on different entries you may have written or on each other's reflection questions. What the beauty of a blog and these comment sections that the students can write to each other is that you can put in a key word like plan, and you can see everything that you've written and everything that each student has written from the beginning of the year, and you can begin to see whether or not the student has made a progression, not just in their plan itself, which is a very specific product, and that's important to look at, but because IP is about process, what you could look at is how do they talk about a plan? How do they conceive of a project plan? At the beginning, they conceived of a plan as simply a list of due dates and who they were going to talk to on those due dates. They begin over the course of the year in their comments to start talking about the project plan in a completely different way. They begin to talk about it as a structuring document, as something that they go to and look at on a regular basis and start adapting and using it as their kind of no, rather than just due dates, really like I remember that I said at the beginning of the year that I was going to develop problem-solving strategies, and I haven't talked about that very much. So there becomes a kind of link between their ongoing plan, their comments, their reflections, what they write in their logbook about their learning. And so you begin to see this huge pattern start to develop. And the reason you're able to do that is because it's just the click of one button with one keyword, and you have everything in front of you. So my response is absolutely, you could use that for evaluation. In fact, it would be a very easy and a very rich way to evaluate a specific criterion that you had decided you were going to focus on for maybe for a term progress report, or it could be for the main report card. And because you've explained to the students how you're going to evaluate, because you've explained to them which criterion you're looking at, because you've told them all the way along what kinds of evidence is going to show you proof of that they've sort of developed that criterion, then when it comes time to evaluate, you just put in your keywords and you read their progression and you say, okay, this child really has shown a huge leap in how they understand what a project plan is. Look at the vocabulary, look at the reflection, look at their interactions with their classmates and how they're giving feedback to others. So my answer is yes, absolutely. That is how I would use the blog in terms of an evaluation process.
Thank you very much. Correct. It was also to try to see how one gauges or how one gets students to, one has to, in a way, it's a teachable moment to teach them how to critique and how to engage in advancing a discussion. So that's where I find some of my students get stuck in not knowing how to further a discussion amongst students, amongst themselves even. They usually just say, oh, it's great. and then that's it, and they can't go any further. So that's a teachable moment. That's not necessarily something to evaluate.
It's too bad that it takes us so long to start to talk to students about how they're learning, because that's something that will facilitate their learning throughout their lives. In this reform, we introduced that whole notion of metacognition and metacognitive strategies. It's probably the most important concept in learning, in education. Once you understand how you learn, once you can talk about how you learn and identify where you're struggling and where your strengths are and what makes it easier for you to learn, you just become a better learner, a faster learner. You identify your learning more quickly, you understand your weaknesses more quickly and are able to address them. So I think that's exactly what, by having those conversations with students, you're helping them develop their metacognitive strategies. Okay, so we've come to the end of our information session. So thank you very much.